Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome back to Adventure Capital, where we not only discuss the entrepreneurial journeys and adventures with founders who have raised capital on WeFunder, but also the different resource providers and mentors helping founders along the way. Huzzah! Today we have Reich of Harness, a community management tool designed specifically for innovation and entrepreneurship community needs. You know how we love to support our communities. WeFunder gang, take it away.
So, Bryce, great to have you with us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and so maybe you could get started by just giving us an overview of yourself personally and how you came to be in this role at Harness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to kind of start off early terms, I grew up in Southern California, lower middle class. Higher education wasn't super important. Very working class family, and I saw entrepreneurship at a young age as a outlet to create my own opportunity, but I didn't really know it was entrepreneurship. So I started off at 12 years old, printing out business cards and going around my mobile home park. And it just said odd jobs and had my phone number on it. I didn't say what pricing, I didn't say anything like that or what I would do. And I would walk around at 12, paint fences, move things, all that. So that was my start to the entrepreneur journey. And as I was growing up, I was working really hard, but higher education was never super important to me. Especially education in general, especially growing up in the family that I did grow up in. But yeah, as I was going through high school, I graduated high school at the bottom, I think 10% or 15% of my class. So the only route
that is refreshingly transparent for you to just vulnerably admit that right at the outset of this podcast, Bryce. I love it.
yeah.
Normally the other way around, right? People are like, well, I finished top of my class in high school and I finished in the top, 3%. So I love it. Thank you.
I graduated from Harvard at 8 years old. So I was completely opposite of that. And, if in the United States, if you're not good in school and you don't really have a lot of avenues out and no really sense of direction, the place that you go is join the military. And so I joined the U.S. Navy and I served 4 years there. I was on the anti-submarine warfare teams out of Japan. And then I was also on the anti-piracy boarding teams.
So were you like onshore in Japan, or are you like, stationed on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the
So
ocean?
I was actually stationed on a lot smaller of a ship than an aircraft carrier. So I was on a guided missile destroyer, USS Jonathan McCain. So I was out there, and that's where we would sit outside in North Korea or China or all those other really fun places to sit in the middle of the ocean at.
How do you? So now you work with startups. You're working for a startup.
Mm-hmm.
What did being in the military for a few years teach you about startups? Is it like, I presume there's kind of a lot of parallels. There's a lot of kind of synergies in the skills that you learn and the kind of attributes you develop in the military versus working in a startup.
Yeah, I would say, I think there's so much parallel. And this is something that I talk to a lot of veterans about, and there's a lot of good programs for veteran entrepreneurs.
Veterans are highly entrepreneurial, right? As well, like the rate of startup kind of creation among veterans is like very, very high.
Yeah, and I think that's because and it's in for Harness, our company, myself and my co-founder, we both served in the military together, and something within the military that they really push is there's a few things. First off is really this like critical and creative thinking. As much as there's strict ways of how to do things and guidelines, when you're in the middle of the ocean and you're a 19-year-old person, guy or gal, and $1 million piece of equipment breaks, sometimes there's not guidelines. And so you really have to have an innovative and new way of thinking.
I was going to say, because that is like potentially slightly counterintuitive, because in some respects, you might think, okay, military, like, command and control, like strict discipline, like chain of command. Like you might think that's almost kind of, in
Yeah.
conflict with entrepreneurship, but
You
you're
know,
saying no.
I'm saying on the surface it looks like that, but when you're in the thick of it, and depending upon your leadership, like myself and my co-founder, we both had really good leadership that allowed us to really look at problems in a different way. And I was on the tactical side anyways for a lot of our missions. So when you're looking at a tactical situation, there's a lot of theory and different ways of looking at a problem, and really trying to be creative and essentially beat the other person out, which would be whoever we were going against or anything like that. So I think it really thrived in that. And at the end of the day too, the military drives this idea of grit. Whatever it is, you're working long hours, long days, long weeks, you're out in the middle of the ocean for months and months and months. You really get to know, you're either going to be a hard worker and work your butt off the whole time and really drive, or you're going to kind of sit by the wayside. And fortunate enough, myself and my co-founder both were those people that had a high attuned to grit, coming from the military.
Did you meet Jeremy in the military, or how did you guys meet?
Yeah, so we were actually stationed on the same ship together.
Oh wow,
so
that's amazing.
Yeah, so we've been working together for 8 years now, total, and we've been working on the company for about 3 years together.
So that's a nice segue. So yeah, how did you guys go from being shipmates in the Navy to starting Harness together?
Yeah, so when he got out, he went up to UC Berkeley, and I got out. I went to kids education wasn't super high on my priority list at the time. I went to a small little community college, and then finished off my bachelor's and master's at some other colleges. But over at Berkeley, while he was there, he had a class project, to start a company, and he really found it very difficult to connect as a founder to the resources that Berkeley has to offer. Everything was very siloed, and as a founder, you're kind of lost, or as an entrepreneur itself, you're lost, because the school itself took a very top-down approach to where they had a lot of programs, but at the end of the day, it didn't really connect and cater to the entrepreneur itself, because one or however many programs they have isn't going to fit their whole community. And so he actually, with a bunch of volunteer interns, built out the first version of Harness, and got some interest from Blackstone Launchpad Techstars over at UC Berkeley. And that's when he gave me a call. Actually, he reached out to me on LinkedIn, and it sounded like he was trying to sell me on a pyramid scheme. He's like, I got a proposition for you. And I was like, okay, all right, dude. All right, let's connect. But at that point, he asked for my help, because he knew that I was in sales a lot and business development. And that was kind of I have 10 years of experience at this point on that. And so he was like, yeah, can I have some help? And after a month, he, asked me to come on as a co-founder. And so then we just went from there. So he originally started with a bunch of interns, and then brought me on as a co-founder. And then we have one other co-founder as well. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. It kind of fell into my lap, honestly.
Yeah. As some of the best opportunities in life are once to do. I'm kind of, we'll get into Harness in a minute, but before we do that, I mean, so you've been in like business development for a decade. You mentioned, like, I'm just kind of curious to touch on that for a second. Like, what do you think it takes to be good in that role? Like, and I've noticed, like, you are really good in that role. So like, why are you so good? Like, what's the secret to crushing that role?
Yeah, so I think fortunate enough, I've had a lot of experiences, diverse experiences in business development, that really allowed me to refine who I am today when it comes to business development. But honestly, I think anybody who's really trying to get into sales, I would say go do a door-to-door sales job for 6 months, and that'll get you to be a pretty dang good.
That's so interesting. My first job when I was like 18, just out of high school, I was on like a gap year. I'd spent the second half of my gap year teaching in a school in Zambia. The first half of my gap year was like cold calling people, and selling them double glazing. I think it's called double glazing in the UK. I think it's called that in the US, but basically selling people windows on a telephone.
Mhm.
And it was like absolutely soul destroying. And like
Oh
the
yeah.
vast majority of people would like not just immediately put the phone down, but like scream expletives at me, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I wonder if that's like kind of what you're getting at, is like the
Mhm.
kind of grueling like grind. So
Ye-
why is like a door-to-door sales good preparation for a
Yeah.
career in biz dev?
So, I mean, door to door, or I mean, something like that you've done, because I worked for a painting company, so very same kind of line of work that you did.
Mhm.
I think, I think with it, what is really important when you're doing door to door sales is you have to plan out strategically first off, where you're going to do it, because I'm not going to go into a place where the medium income is lower than what they
Right.
can, what we're charging. So you have to look at the median income. You have to look at their house itself. As you're going up, you're getting all this data on their home, because I was selling painting, all this data on their home as you're walking up. And that's the same thing as when you're giving a phone call or when you're doing a sales call. You're getting all this data right before, so you can use all that when you're in their conversation. And then the next thing is that it's intimidating knocking on somebody's door randomly. I did it for so long, and every single time I still had like my heart raced a little bit. And then the no's, you're going to getting a no to your face is so much harder than getting a no on an email or a phone, especially when they're using a hose to squirt you with water, or like they're throwing things at you.
Wait, did you actually have people squirt you with a hose?
I had a hose. I had somebody basically chase me down with a car. I had people throw stuff at me.
Like, okay, dude, you don't want the paint job. That's fine. There's no need to run me over.
Yeah. I was 16. I was a 16, clean cut. I wasn't. And it wasn't. Yeah, it was just. I wasn't doing anything illegal.
Nefarious. Yeah.
I was just trying to make a living for myself. And so I think that's really important. And I bring that to and it's also relationship building. It really allows you to learn how to build a relationship in person, so that you can use those tools when you're on email or on phone. I mean, just like with you and me, I think there's been so much between us, and so much just from our relationship thus far, where, if I didn't have a lot of these other experiences, I wouldn't realize that, the other person on the other side is so important, and what their needs are so important as well. And I think door-to-door helped with that, along with, my phone sales and all these other, experiences with it.
So that's really interesting. So that's kind of your kind of role on the business development side. Why don't you tell us about Harness? You kind of touched on it when you talking about Jeremy at Berkeley, but tell us about Harness. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so we are a company that really tries to open up the opportunity to help entrepreneur support organizations. And so what we do is we launch white labeled platforms at these different entrepreneur support organizations. So we can, an ESO would be a school, a center for entrepreneurship, a nonprofit, a for-profit, anywhere that's serving entrepreneurs. And these aren't just tech entrepreneurs; these are brick and mortar, every type of entrepreneur. And so we launch kind of just a community engagement platform for these individual organizations, to where the entrepreneur itself can get access to investors, other innovators, mentors, job opportunities if they're trying to join a startup, and they can also make some hires through our kind of marketplace as well. And what's really cool with us is that when we launch at, say Berkeley, or launch at, in Startup Canada, or in programs in Somalia, they're all connected. So somebody from Somalia can work for a company in the United States, and at that point bring in capital and make an economic impact in Somalia, because they have a new opportunity.
So you kind of touched on this already, but let's say, an example customer, and is it like Berkeley Skydeck, or is it like some group at Berkeley? Like, kind of let's walk through an example customer, and then what are the different like tangible kind of components of the Harness product that they're going to be able to use? And like, I think you mentioned like a jobs board, or a kind of, is it like a Slack type forum? Like what are customers kind of getting?
Yeah. Well, so for Berkeley, the customer at Berkeley itself is the Blackstone Launchpad program over there. So that's the customer there. At some of our other schools, again, it's Center of Entrepreneurship. At some of the nonprofits, it's just their program directors that want it. So it's really kind of whoever's engaging and focused on the community itself that they're building. As for the tangible things that they're getting, so the entrepreneur itself, yes, there's kind of like a Slack feature. So we built an internal Slack essentially for communication. You can have channels, public channels, private channels, everything like that. We do have a Q&A feature to where people can ask questions into the community, very kind of forum based, which has been really awesome because we're seeing so many questions that, we wouldn't have been able to even think of to put into like our FAQs or anything like that. And then people can answer those as well. But then we have, a job board. And that's where startups can start hiring individuals and go through the hiring process itself. And then they have a place to explore the people in your community and in the whole harness community, schedule meetings with them, chat with them, especially if they're mentors or investors. And then, and then a repository for your startups. So you can kind of explore all the startups within our program, and then also within your own individual ecosystem. And on the admin side, we are collecting all this data. So, a lot of organizations that I go in, one of my first questions is, what's important to you for data? And a lot of them are like, oh, what's the economic impact, or what's the impact our program's making?
Mm-hmm.
And the next question I asked is, how many startups do you have? How much fundraising have they done? How many startup members? And then also how many jobs have been created? And majority of the time they can't answer that. And that's where we come in and say, well, this platform is now allowing you to gain all that data while still servicing your organization.
And is your revenue model like solely you're kind of getting a subscription from, those entrepreneurial support organizations, or are you like, trying to sell, or you kind of making money from Carter, who wants like, or can give you some affiliate marketing revenue on selling Carter to the startups in your database?
Yeah, so our initial business model actually when we first started was B2B enterprise. So we were selling long sales cycles, high price point, and like 2-3 year contracts. And we've always wanted to switch to a freemium model because we wanted to support the 99%. Majority of entrepreneur support organizations can't afford, the high price that we were charging before. And so we switched over to that. And so we do charge administrators a fee. We do have a free version up to 50 users. But then it goes to like $50 a month to $200 a month. And then there's an enterprise version as well. So that's the business model right now for revenue. We are working with a few other organizations and doing some partnerships just to kind of test the waters on different revenue models. So, one of them is, sourcing ideas from the community. So we're working with Cisco on that because they're trying to get more ideas for new developments that Cisco wants to do. So we have a project with them, and then with another larger organization, we're helping with hiring entrepreneurial minded people through our platform. And I think in the future we have a few ideas potentially like a membership base where people can start charging for members, or and then like you kind of mentioned too is these services, because we do have a repository of a lot of entrepreneurs that can prosper pretty greatly from organizations like Carta, or even WeFunder and some of those other organizations.
You must have now talked to dozens, probably at this point hundreds, maybe even thousands of ESOs, as you put it. Companies, organizations working to support entrepreneurs, support founders, tech entrepreneurs, Main Street entrepreneurs. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that your customers experience? I guess kind of period, but also obviously the ones that you can help them solve with Harness.
Yeah, I think the first thing first is majority of the top teams I talk to are understaffed and are lacking the ability to scale. That's probably the most common issue that I see. And that's a perfect issue that Harness can fix, because the things that are causing them to take their time away from some of their other initiatives are entrepreneurs inquiring about some information, wanting to join a team, or wanting to figure out how to access certain resources. And, these questions start building up, and and then also when you're trying to match people with other people, all this stuff starts building up, and it takes, somebody who's full time, all their time just to deal with that. And if we have a system that actually can, put your community in one area and really solve all those issues, and even instead of getting a bunch of emails, they can just schedule a meeting with you straight from the platform, or message you straight through the platform.
It just frees up bandwidth.
Yeah, it frees up so much bandwidth. And so I think that's the biggest thing is now we're literally giving ESOs the opportunity to scale like a way that they would never have done before.
So that kind of is about like lowering the cost of your customers, right? They have kind of these ongoing like operational costs that you're helping to kind of, lower for them, streamline their operations, free up bandwidth. Is there any kind of, on the other side of the equation, like the revenue or like value, are you kind of helping build more community among the entrepreneurs and founders in one of these ESOs ecosystems, or what are the kind of values that you're bringing?
Yeah, so I think something that's so important, and our company's been part of Alchemist Accelerator, which is one of the top accelerators out there.
Yeah,
and awesome. Great program, and just going through that experience, and then also the hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations I've had. What I've noticed is that as an entrepreneur in the program and coming out of it, community is not. It could be difficult to leverage your community. Alchemist does a pretty good job, but they also have a large, they have a deep pocket. But organizations like them who don't maybe have a deep pocket, when it comes to the entrepreneur itself, I want to have the accessibility to know and connect with people, not just in my organizations, but in pre-vetted organizations that are for entrepreneurs. You look at LinkedIn and you're just seeing every professional under the sun. If you look at the Harness Network, it's only people who are part of entrepreneur support organizations. And so you're getting connected with that. So I think there's a huge value to that. And that creates a more engaged community. And honestly, at the end of the day, it creates more success. As as an entrepreneur, as a founder, and just somebody who's worked in the startup realm for a long time, you're only strong as your network and your community. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to leverage them somehow. So.
How do you, one thing I've been struck by both at Kiva and WeFunder is like, as you scale, you were talking about like helping organizations scale. I feel like there's a real tension where like, as you scale, it becomes like really, really hard to kind of maintain that like true, authentic, deep community. So are there any tips you have, or like amazing ESOs you've seen that are like, have done an awesome job of like maintaining the integrity of that community as they scale?
Yeah, actually there's one in San Diego. It's called the Reich Connect, or the Reich Innovation Lab. And they're out of one of their community colleges down here, but they service the whole community itself. And they joined us pretty early on, but they were just starting up. They had a few companies go through their program, and they've done a really good job continuously engaging the community, continuously engaging their alumni, and being really hands-on. And I think there's a few things that they've done. The first thing is that they've stayed in their lane. First off, they're supporting really early stage startups, and they're staying there. They're not trying to like get out of their lane like a lot of these other ESOs.
Yeah, I think that's key. It's like if every entrepreneur like is in the same vein, then they can support each other, right? If every entrepreneur in that community is a brewery, then they've been in the same situation as other breweries. If you add breweries alongside tech startups, then it's like the value that those guys can get from obviously there's some kind of synergies where founders can help founders in every industry, because it's a hard job to start something and lead something in any industry. But I feel like where there's a real overlap, that can really help to kind of increase the value that different community members get from kind of interacting with each other.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that's why the Rec is so successful, is that they're staying in their lane, they're putting the people near each other. And what they also do is that they really empower the community itself from the beginning to take ownership of not only the company, but of the program that they're in. And I think that's something that's really important. So many people take from programs that they go through. And at the same time, they don't understand that they have to put a lot of work in to make it successful. One of the things that an alumni from Alchemist said to us as we were going in, because we talked to a bunch of alumni, she said, how do we get the most out of this? And one of the most common things that was said was, it's going to give you as much as you put in. And I think that's so true with even your startup. Your startup's going to be as successful as much as you put in a healthy manner. Obviously, putting in 20 hours a day for weeks and weeks and weeks, not healthy. But yeah, so I think that's something that's really important, and that's something that Rec Innovation Lab really cultivates. And I think San Diego in general, they do a really good job of doing that, because then they start, they have a lot of programs in San Diego to help entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneur support organizations specifically. And for them, they stay in their lane. They're not trying to take from others. If they see a good startup coming through, they're like, doesn't fit for us. They're going to point them in another direction. And I think that's what really builds a good community.
That's interesting. One other thing I think is the individual people, like the person running the ESO, or maybe even more importantly, the person like in charge of organizing events, or organizing, like connecting with the founders. In Nashville, where I live, there was this woman who was working for the Entrepreneur Center, Haley Zapowski, and she was just like so energetic, so dynamic, would just like, be so good at welcoming everyone. And like, she herself, I feel like, has driven so much of the kind of, community among startup founders here. I think, like I look at, some of my colleagues at WeFunder, it's like the individual people in those roles are so fundamentally important to, basically determining like how well that organization is able to build community among the founders in its network.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, now that you say it, one of the things, and I told Jeremy about this, and I talked to our team about it too, because we really actually like the way that WeFunder functions as a team. Pretty much every single conversation I have with you, you can continuously talk about how awesome your BD team is and how awesome just parts of your team are. And that's awesome. And I love that.
We're really great. By the way, did I mention, Bryce, that WeFunder is really great? The people at WeFunder, especially the BD team, are just really amazing people.
Yeah, I heard that once or twice, that they're pretty awesome. But I think that's so important, right? And I think that's so important in any community, whether you're a community in a company, is like the leadership really, and this is coming from too, like I'm getting my master's in organizational leadership at night on the side. Like this is stuff that I studied, academically as well. As when a leader really cares and really thinks there's so much great and opportunity within the individuals in an organization, if it's an ESO or a startup, that's when something's going to make a difference. That's when people are going to be more engaged. And it all comes down to who is the leader of this. And I talk to a lot of ESOs, and they're saying, I tried all these platforms, that they failed. And I've had to call them out a few times, like, yeah, it's probably because of you, in all honesty.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing. That's just not something that you're great at. And that's fine.
I think like
now,
and there's a skill set of like the person in terms of, are they warm? Are they kind of, community oriented? Are they passionate about it? I think there's another aspect as well, which is around consistency. I had a friend in San Francisco who worked in community. That was her job, was like building community. And I asked her one time, like, what's the secret to your success? And she said the word consistency. It's like we meet every month or every week. We have the same format. people know what they're getting in. We're there. I hear the same thing about podcasts, which we're really bad on it. We find it's like people want, it's like, okay, every week on a Thursday I get political gabfest like podcast every Thursday, and so there's kind of the consistency then like helps to build community as well, which
I think that's
again, it's like comes from the person, right? If that
Yeah.
person has the discipline
Ability.
and the drive to like make this happen every week or every
Yeah.
month on that regular cadence, that can really help.
Yeah. And I mean, bringing it back to like just business development too, it's consistency is key. Like I'm just with our interactions, I have a whole list right now. I'm trying not to bombard you with a bunch of introductions right now, but
Please bombard away.
it's okay. Perfect. I'll do that then. But it's consistency. It's saying, okay, well, there's something that what you guys are doing is helping our communities, and it's something that we're lacking as a company. So we're saying, okay, well, WeFunder fits that gap for us. And so we can go in and say, here's our platform, and here's WeFunder, which is, the best equity crowdsourcing platform out there. And so, as we're doing this, it's being consistent with our relationship, or it's being consistent with, relationship with your partners. And I think that's something that's been so key in even the success of Harness. 60% of I think it was like 50 or 60% of our clients, when we were, straight B2B enterprise, were through referrals. And it's because we were consistent with our people, and consistent with, with them.
Well, that makes me think of another idea as well, which is values alignment. I think about this typically more with respect to business partnerships, but I think it probably applies to community as well. Probably ties back to what you're saying about the Reich organization in San Diego. With partnerships, I think like you've got to have deep values alignment at the outset, right? So if you're trying to help entrepreneurial support organizations, they're trying to help founders. One of the ways that founders, always say they need more help on is raising capital. Well, then if you can connect that ESA to WeFunder as a way to help their entrepreneurs raise capital, there's like a very deep kind of, there's mutual kind of value there and value alignment. And I think like, I always think about that from a partnership perspective, unless there's kind of alignment at the outset, then you're kind of wasting your time.
100%.
And the same thing on the community building side, right? Which is like on the San Diego thing, if all of the entrepreneurs in that community are kind of in the same like sector, let's say, or same stage, then there will be kind of mutual value that the members of the community are getting. And if the community members are benefiting from being part of the community, then they are incentivized to kind of keep contributing to you, showing up at, being a part of the community. And so, kind of.
It's a weird concept, right? The circle of life. I think it's a brand new concept or something. Or actually, I think there might be a song in Lion King about it. But it's it's true. It is the
not rocket
science,
not some like blinding revelation. Yeah,
exactly. And kind of just giving example when you talk about value alignment. I'll give you two examples of large organizations that we're partnered with that really align with our values, and then I won't say the names of the other organization that doesn't align. But two of the organizations are a collegiate entrepreneur organization, which has 250 chapters globally supporting collegiate entrepreneurship, and then Startup Canada, which is servicing Canada, all of Canada. And the value really is, how can we make entrepreneurship, first off, and not only just an idea or this buzzword, but actual like actionable items for somebody to take on, whether it's entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship. And then also at the end of the day, how can we set them up for most success, whoever the bottom tier is, whether it's a student, a community member, whatever it is. How can we set them up for success, whether their startup fails, is successful, or how can we set them up for success as a human? That's important, because at the end of the day, there's always humans behind every single startup, every single company. And then there's other organizations that we've tried partnering up with where their focus was, their bottom line was money. Hey, we're willing to partner with you, but you have to pay us money to partner. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't really make sense in my mind. And that's what they wanted. Not saying that's a bad thing, but it's just not the way that our company runs, or me when I talk about partnerships run. I think it really should be very mutually beneficial and aligned. And that's the same thing within a company too, and within these communities, right? you join communities, you join things that have the same value as you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, we're probably coming into land here. We always ask everyone on the podcast for one piece of advice. I guess when you're starting a startup, or maybe if you're starting an ESO, entrepreneurial support organization. One parting piece of advice from Bryce.
take care of yourself, sleep 8 hours, eat, work out. Make sure when you're on 100%. If you're on and it's 50%, you're doing you and your whole team and your whole community no good. So make sure you take care of yourself. And, again, that's through sleep, eating right, working out. If you're in therapy, I'm in therapy, if you're in therapy, doing all these things, make sure you're taking care of your mental health. Because at the end of the day, burnout's real. Whether you're starting a community, which I've seen a lot of them die because the person at the head of it is, doing too much. So there's that. And then one last thing on that too is hire for your weaknesses. You don't always have to, all your weaknesses. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to try to learn this, and this, and this, and this. At the end of the day, you're not going to learn it to the expertise that that's going to be beneficial. So hire for your weaknesses. So yeah, those would be my parting words.
That's awesome, man. Well, Bryce, it's been a really fun conversation. Really cool to dig in a little more to, building community among entrepreneurs and founders and the organizations that are trying to do that. What are some of the challenges they're having? So, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. And where can people go to learn more about Harness?
Yeah, so you can go to joinharness.com. You can join our waitlist right now to launch your free community platform. Or you can email me at Bryce, BRYCE @joinharness.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. I'm sure we will be seeing each other again very soon, but thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
All right. Thanks, Jonny. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Venture Capital. I hope you laughed, took notes, shed a tear, and most importantly, feel ready to go off on your own adventure. And remember, whenever you're ready, We Funders here to help. Be sure to like and leave a review, gang.